forbearance. A deferment or forbearance essentially suspends your payments but does not count as a monthly payment towards loan cancellation or forgiveness. And any interest accrued while you're in forbearance or deferment will be added to your principal once you resume repayment. So if you're unemployed or between jobs, you'll be asked to pay $0 a month in any income-driven repayment plan, and that will keep you current on your loans and meeting towards the eventual discharge after 20 or 25 years. It's important to note that the current payment pause granted to student loan borrowers under COVID relief bills is not a deferment or forbearance. If your payments are currently paused, you are not accumulating interest, and each month still counts towards any eventual loan cancellation or forgiveness. Okay, so the final pro, before moving on to our next section, is that these repayment plans are necessary to qualify for public service loan forgiveness, and they work in tandem with public service loan forgiveness. This means you'll pay as little as possible and get the maximum forgiveness on your loans if you're enrolled in one of these repayment plans. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Val now for public service loan forgiveness.
Thank you so much, Jessica. So as we talked about, so we're going to talk just a little bit first about what is public service loan forgiveness. So public service loan forgiveness is a federal program that could allow you to have the remainder of your balance on your direct loan forgiven after 10 years tax-free. Public service loan forgiveness isn't a repayment plan like the income-based repayment plan or pay as you earn. It's a separate program that incentivizes a career in public service. So to qualify, you need to do the following after October 1st, 2007. Make 120 qualifying on-time payments or 10 years worth towards your direct loan, and be working in public service for at least 30 hours a week. You can combine multiple part-time public service jobs to meet this requirement. Once you make 120 on-time payments, you can apply to have the Department of Education forgive the remainder of your federal student loan debt. So to qualify, you have to answer yes to these 5 questions at the same time for all 120 payments. So the first question is, do you work in public service? So public service is a really broad term when it comes to public service loan forgiveness. It includes anyone employed in the public sector or qualifying nonprofit. To put it another way, it doesn't matter what you do, just who employs you. Nearly every AFT member is employed in public service. So qualifying public service employers can be any level of government, federal, state, county, municipal, or tribal, including public school districts, public and nonprofit hospitals, and public institutions of higher education. If you're employed and paid by any level of government or by a 501c3 nonprofit institution, you should meet this requirement. It doesn't matter if you're a teacher, teacher's assistant, a professor, a principal, a dean, a custodian, or a superintendent. If you work for a public service employer, you should qualify for public service loan forgiveness. So one last time, it doesn't matter what you do, it matters who employs you. So here's an excellent example of why privatization is so harmful in the public sector. If you used to work, for example, in the state of Kansas, and your work has been privatized or outsourced by a company, you can no longer qualify for public service loan forgiveness. This is one of the many reasons we as unions fight to protect public service and to ensure that it's not outsourced so that folks can apply for these programs and get the support that they need. The second question is, do you work full-time? To qualify for public service loan forgiveness, you have to work full-time. This is described as at least 30 hours a week for at least 8 months of the year, but it can also be whatever your employer defines as full-time, as long as it meets those minimum requirements. As we said earlier, you can also combine hours, multiple public service employers to meet this requirement. To do that, you just have to make sure that you get those multiple employers to fill out the certification form. And if you're sending those in, you want to send them in all together so that Fed Ed, or I'm sorry, so the agency doesn't confuse the situation if you're trying to send in a bunch of different ones. If you use AFT Summer membership benefit, you'll be able to easily manage multiple employer certifications, and the process is a lot easier as well. So the third question is, does your student loan qualify? So only direct loans are eligible for public service loan forgiveness. This requirement is one of the most common reasons borrowers, especially borrowers who took out loans prior to 2010, are rejected for public service loan forgiveness. Federal family education loans, which were prevalent before 2010, do not qualify as is for public service loan forgiveness. If you have a Fell Stanford loan or a Parent Plus loan right now, you can consolidate it into a direct consolidation loan. If you don't consolidate your payments, any payment you make on your non-direct loan won't count towards public service loan forgiveness. You need to go to studentaid.gov, and it'll take you about 30 minutes to complete the form. Then the next question is, does your repayment plan qualify? As we mentioned earlier, that's why we went through it very, very painstakingly. Only income-driven repayment plans are that we discussed in the last section, and the 10-year standard repayment plan qualify for public service loan forgiveness. Again, that's really important. So only the 4 income-driven repayment plans we discussed earlier and the 10-year standard repayment plan qualify for public service loan forgiveness. You do not want to be in the 10-year standard repayment plan if you're planning to apply for public service loan forgiveness, because if you make 10 years worth of on-time payments under that plan, that means you will have paid off your entire loan and there will be nothing left to forgive. However, if you are in the 10-year standard repayment plan now, those payments can wind up counting towards your 120 on-time payments, which is good news. To take advantage of public service loan forgiveness, you want to minimize your monthly payments to enroll in an income-driven repayment plan so you can maximize the amount of the loan forgiveness. And finally, the last question for this is, do your payments qualify? To have your loans forgiven, you have to make 120 qualifying on-time payments. That means once you receive a bill, you must pay the exact amount of that payment within 15 days of the due date. It is critical to double check that you're making on-time payments, as millions of borrowers are constantly 1 month behind on their payments without even knowing it. The Department of Education actually calls these folks rolling late payers. They're in a situation where every month they're paying a few days late, or they missed a single payment years ago and don't even know it. Because of that, none of their payments are considered on time. And that means if they're trying to build towards public service loan forgiveness, none of these payments will count. So if you make an on-time payment for the exact amount of your payment to qualify, in general, the easiest way to ensure an on-time payment is once you receive your monthly bill, pay the exact amount due before the due date. We want to reiterate for those who currently have your payment paused under the provisions of the COVID relief bills, each month of the pause payment counts towards your 120 total payments, even though you are not paying. You do not need to make your minimum payment to make progress towards public service loan forgiveness if your payments are paused during the pandemic. That is key and a huge piece of relief for a lot of our members. If you answer yes to each of these questions for all 120 payments, you should be set for public service loan forgiveness. So let's review one last time. As long as you're making on-time payments in an income-driven repayment plan on your direct loan while working full-time in public service, you should be eligible to have all of your direct loan forgiven tax-free after making 120 payments. If you can't answer yes to all 5 questions right now, there are steps you can take to qualify, but you should act now. Otherwise, you will wind up paying more than you have to. There's a few more things we want to share about public service loan forgiveness before we move in onto the questions. First, these payments do not need to be consecutive. If you switch jobs or need to take time off of work, you're not going to be penalized. So if you make, let's say, 100 qualifying payments and then miss a month, you won't start over. The next on-time payment you make will be your 101 payment. That means if you leave public service, but come back to it later, you can pick up where you left off. The good news is that this works retroactively too. So any payment you've made on time in a qualifying repayment plan on a direct loan while working full-time in public service after October 1st, 2007 will be counted towards your 120 total payments. So if you've been able to answer yes to all 5 of these questions for the last few years and are only enrolled in public service loan forgiveness now, those payments should count towards your loan forgiveness. So let's talk about recertifying. How do you recertify? You can do public service loan employment verification and application on your own, but AFT members also, once again, have access to Summer, a student loan tool that will provide support through this process, including making sure that the form is filled out correctly, which is challenging on its own, and getting the form filled out by your employer and sending it to Fed Loan Servicing. You can enroll in Summer by going to www.aft.org/benefits/summer. If you want to certify on your own, you can do the following. Fill out the public service loan forgiveness application. You can start that application using the PSLF help tool at student.aid/PSLF, or you can use the paper form, which is included in the resource guide. First, fill in the information required from you. So if you are using the paper form, this information is on page 1, and then your signature, and then your social security number at the top of page 2. Whether you use the help tool or the paper form, you'll need to bring a printed form to your employer to complete the remainder of the application. After that is complete, you will mail or fax the form to Fed Loan Servicing. So Fed Loan Servicing is the only student loan servicer that counts payments that qualify for public service loan forgiveness. So you'll need to send them this form. Their address is on page 4 of the certification form. Before you send it in, double check for any mistakes on the form. A common problem with the employer side of the form is that employers forget to check line 6, saying that you're still employed. And this is a particular problem if you're an adjunct faculty member. So make sure that they are checking that line 6. So after you make 120 payments, you will submit your public service loan forgiveness application one final time. You must be working full-time in public service when you apply for and receive loan forgiveness. So it's important to note that the current process for certifying eligibility for public service loan forgiveness is slow, frustrated, and in flux. According to media accounts, borrowers are reporting that Fed Loan Servicing is taking upwards of 12 months in some instances to provide public service loan forgiveness employment certification forms and confirm eligibility. Don't let these bureaucratic hurdles, delays discourage you. It's worth the hassle to have your student loans wiped out. Remember, no matter who your current servicer is, send your employment certification form to Fed Loan Servicing for processing. Again, the address is on the form on the top of page 4. Pay attention to correspondence from your current loan servicer who will be still sending you bills, and from Fed Loan Servicing. So make sure to provide an address and contact information for any of these organizations that is current and up to date and that you can access, so that you can make sure that you're keeping up with the correspondence and they can get in touch with you if need be. So we've covered a lot today, so I'm just going to review some important tips and before we get to questions. So first, call your servicer. Loan servicers are paid by